start, please.
We will begin today's program with a group photograph. The leaders will now jointly inaugurate the Gandhi Solar Park at the United Nations headquarters, the Gandhi Peace Garden at State University of New York College at Old Westbury, we have all our dignitaries here now. Yeah. Plasma ball has been brought in. Your Excellencies, please come up to the dot and place your hand on the plasma ball. A short video is going to accompany the inauguration. Thank you, Excellencies. May I now request you to kindly take your seats. Your Excellencies, we have placed a special stamp of Mahatma Gandhi that was brought out by the United Nations Postal Administration, and they are at your table. I would now invite you to watch a short film on Mahatma Gandhi, which has been made specially for this occasion.
In a world torn apart with strife, he walked a very different path. The journey and the destination were one and the same. The freedom he sought was inseparable from peace and non-violence. Deeply rooted in India's civilizational values, Gandhi channelized the timeless philosophy of peace for the realities of the contemporary world. Truth for him was both the means and the end. The desire for truth, satyagraha, was the cornerstone of Gandhian politics and philosophy. The truth for Gandhi was the threading together of the principle of Sarvodaya, holistic development for all, and Antyodaya, upliftment and dignity for the weakest. With this inner truth, Gandhi created a mass mobilization unmatched by anything the world has ever seen. Picking up a handful of salt as an act of defiance, or creating the political metaphor of the charkha, the humble handloom, his symbols for India's freedom embodied not only the deep moral strength of peaceful resistance, but also the vision of sustainability of an economy with human dimensions. Nothing ever happens in isolation. With startling clarity, Gandhi saw how the crisis of the modern world affects us all, and how the transition from conflict to cooperation needs a global response guided by a shared sense of humanity. His life was his message, walking together on the long road to peace and sustainability. Let us be the change we want in this world.
It is now my honor to invite Dr. S. Jaishankar, the External Affairs Minister of India, for his welcome remarks.
Mr. Secretary General, distinguished world leaders, ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to welcome you all to today's commemorative event where we are celebrating the life and message of Mahatma Gandhi. Today's generation confronts challenges as diverse as climate change and gender justice to terrorism and social development. The philosophy and outlook of Mahatma Gandhi offer powerful tools to discern the path to addressing them. Gandhiji's advocacy of simple living and high thinking highlighted living in consonance with the environment, reining in excessive consumerism and exploitation of natural resources. He made us think about climate change before that term was even invented. In every way, he is the symbol of the sustainable development goals that we today seek to achieve. Gandhiji's life was also an example of standing up to fear and intimidation. His thoughts are a source of courage as we fight terrorism in all its forms and manifestation. His ideals have influenced some of the greatest figures of our age. Ladies and gentlemen, communities all over the world need inspired leaders to shape a hopeful future. Today, we have in our midst those who have led through their values and example. Let us hear them.
Thank you, Excellency, for highlighting the context of this event. Thank you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is now my honor to invite His Excellency, Mr. Narendra Modi, Prime Minister of India, for his special remarks on this occasion.
Secretary General Antonio
Mr. Secretary
Gutteres,
General, Mr. Antonio Gutteres,
President Moon,
President Moon,
Prime Minister Lee,
Prime Minister Lee,
Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina,
Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina,
Prime Minister Andrew Holness,
Prime Minister Andrew Holness,
Prime Minister Arden,
Prime Minister Arden,
Prime Minister Lotte Shering,
Prime Minister Lotte Shering,
Excellencies,
Excellencies,
friends,
friends,
हम सभी महात्मा गांधी की
we have all
150वीं जन्म जयंती
today
पर
on the occasion of Mahatma Gandhi's
आज के युग में
150th anniversary
उनकी प्रासंगिकता पर बात करने के लिए एकजुट हुए हैं।
relevance in today's world.
आप सभी विशिष्ट अतिथियों का
I extend
मैं स्वागत
a
करता हूं।
warm welcome to all eminent guests.
महात्मा गांधी की 150वीं जन्म जयंती
I would also like to
और उस समय
express
एक कॉमेमोरेटिव
my
स्टैम्प
felt gratefulness
जारी
to
करने के लिए
for releasing a
मैं यूएन का
stamp on the occasion
विशेष आभार
of
व्यक्त
Gandhi's
करता हूं।
150th birth anniversary.
गांधी जी भारतीय थे,
He was an Indian,
लेकिन
but
सिर्फ भारत के नहीं थे।
he didn't belong only to India.
आज ये मंच
This event today,
इसका जीवंत उदाहरण
a
है।
living example of this.
इतिहास में ऐसा कहीं देखने को नहीं मिलता है
History before,
कि जब किसी व्यक्ति का
person
शासन से दूर दूर तक संबंध नहीं हो
connection with the government,
और वो सत्य और अहिंसा की शक्ति से
with the power of truth,
सदियों पुराने साम्राज्य को
not only
न सिर्फ जकजोर दे,
a centuries old
बल्कि अनेक देशों में भी आजादी की ललक जगा दे।
yearning for independence among
महात्मा गांधी
so many countries.
ऐसे ही व्यक्ति थे
Such a person,
और सत्ता से इतना दूर रहने के बावजूद
far away from the government,
आज भी
he reigns
वो करोड़ों लोगों के दिलों पर राज कर रहे हैं।
of billions of people.
आप कल्पना कर सकते हैं
Imagine
कि जिनसे गांधी जी कभी मिले नहीं,
how much he influenced.
वो भी उनके जीवन से कितना प्रभावित रहे।
Had not even ever met him.
मार्टिन लूथर किंग जूनियर हो
Martin Luther King Jr.
या नेल्सन मंडेला,
or Nelson Mandela,
उनके विचारों का आधार
the basis of their views
महात्मा गांधी थे।
was Mahatma Gandhi.
गांधी जी का विजन था।
It was Gandhiji's vision.
साथियों,
Friends,
आज लोकतंत्र की परिभाषा का एक सीमित अर्थ रह गया है
democracy has
कि जनता अपनी पसंद की सरकार चुने
been the government
और सरकार जनता की अपेक्षा के अनुसार काम करे।
according to the expectations
लेकिन
of the people.
महात्मा गांधी ने
Mahatma Gandhi,
लोकतंत्र की असली शक्ति पर बल दिया।
power of a
उन्होंने वो दिशा दिखाई
showed people
जिसमें लोग
of not
शासन पर निर्भर न हो
on the government,
और स्वावलंबी बने।
self-reliant.
साथियों, महात्मा गांधी
Mahatma Gandhi,
भारत की आजादी की लड़ाई के केंद्र बिंदु थे,
India's fight.
लेकिन पल भर के लिए
But we must also
हमें ये भी सोचना चाहिए कि अगर आजाद देश में गांधी जी पैदा हुए होते तो वो क्या करते।
country.
उन्होंने आजादी की लड़ाई लड़ी, ये बात महत्वपूर्ण है, लेकिन गांधी जी के कार्यों का विस्तार
Importance
सिर्फ इतना ही नहीं था।
extended much,
महात्मा गांधी ने एक ऐसी समाज व्यवस्था का बीड़ा उठाया
creating a social system
जो सरकार पर निर्भर न हो।
be dependent on the government.
महात्मा गांधी
Mahatma Gandhi
परिवर्तन लाए,
about change.
ये सर्वविदित है,
That is well
लेकिन ये कहना भी उचित होगा कि उन्होंने लोगों की आंतरिक शक्ति को जगाकर
inner strength,
उन्हें स्वयं परिवर्तन लाने के लिए
bringing about change.
जागृत किया, प्रेरित किया।
He inspired them.
अगर आजादी के संघर्ष की जिम्मेदारी महात्मा गांधी पर न होती तो भी वो स्वराज और स्वावलंबन के मूल तत्व को लेकर अपना जीवन खपा देते, आगे बढ़ते। गांधी जी का ये विजन आज भारत के सामने बड़ी चुनौतियों के समाधान का बड़ा माध्यम बन रहा है। बीते 5 वर्षों में हमने पीपल्स पार्टिसिपेशन, जन भागीदारी को प्राथमिकता दी है। चाहे स्वच्छ भारत अभियान हो, डिजिटल इंडिया हो, जनता अब इन अभियानों का नेतृत्व खुद कर रही है। साथियों, महात्मा गांधी जी कहते थे कि उनका जीवन ही उनका संदेश है। गांधी जी ने कभी अपने जीवन से प्रभाव पैदा करने का प्रयास नहीं किया, लेकिन उनका जीवन ही प्रेरणा का कारण बन गया। आज हम हाउ टू इम्प्रेस उस दौर में से गुजर रहे हैं। लेकिन गांधी जी का विजन था हाउ टू इंस्पायर। गांधी जी की लोकतंत्र के प्रति निष्ठा की ताकत क्या थी, इससे जुड़ा एक वाक्य मैं जरूर आज आपको कहना चाहूंगा। जब कुछ वर्ष पहले मैं ब्रिटेन की महारानी एलिजाबेथ से मिला तो उन्होंने मुझे बहुत भावुकता के साथ एक छोटा सा रुमाल दिखाया था। ये रुमाल खादी से बना रुमाल था जो गांधी जी ने उन्हें उनकी शादी के समय, उनके मैरिज के समय उपहार के तौर पर भेजा था। सोचिए, जिसके साथ सिद्धांतों का संघर्ष था उसके साथ संबंधों को लेकर कितनी संवेदनशीलता थी, ये महात्मा गांधी का मन बताता है। वो उनका भी भला चाहते थे, सम्मान करते थे। जो उनके विरोधी थे, जिनके साथ वो आजादी की लड़ाई लड़ रहे थे, साथियों, सिद्धांतों के लिए इसी प्रतिबद्धता ने गांधी जी का ध्यान ऐसी 7 विकृतियों की तरफ खींचा जिनके प्रति सभी को जागरूक रहना चाहिए। और उनकी ये 7 बातें आज भी रिलेवेंट है, आने वाले कल भी रिलेवेंट रहने वाली है। उन 7 बातें हैं: वेल्थ विदाउट वर्क, प्लेजर विदाउट कॉन्शियंस, नॉलेज विदाउट कैरेक्टर, बिजनेस विदाउट एथिक्स, साइंस विदाउट ह्यूमैनिटी, रिलीजन विदाउट सैक्रिफाइस, पॉलिटिक्स विदाउट प्रिंसिपल। चाहे क्लाइमेट चेंज हो या फिर आतंकवाद, भ्रष्टाचार हो या फिर स्वार्थपरक सामाजिक जीवन, गांधी जी के ये सिद्धांत हमें मानवता की रक्षा करने के लिए मार्गदर्शक की तरह काम करते हैं। मुझे विश्वास है कि गांधी जी का दिखाया ये रास्ता बेहतर विश्व के निर्माण में प्रेरक सिद्ध होगा। मैं समझता हूं कि जब तक मानवता के साथ गांधी जी के विचारों का ये प्रवाह बना रहेगा, तब तक गांधी जी की प्रेरणा और प्रासंगिकता भी हमारे बीच बनी रहेगी। मैं फिर एक बार आप सभी का बहुत बहुत आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। थैंक यू।
Thank you, Prime Minister Modi, for your insightful remarks and your inspiring leadership. Thank you very much. I would like to now invite His Excellency, Mr. Antonio Gutteres, Secretary General of the United Nations, to address us.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed, it is a great pleasure and a great honor to be here to mark the 150th anniversary of the birth of Mahatma Gandhi, one of the giants of the 20th century, a global icon of peace and an advocate for the most vulnerable. And I thank Prime Minister Modi and the Indian mission for convening this meeting. Gandhiji's vision and philosophy are pillars of the work of the United Nations. Part of his genius lay in his ability to see the interconnectedness and the unity between all things. His political achievements, including leading the movement that ended colonial rule in India, using peace, love, and integrity to prevail. But his vision went far beyond politics to encompass human rights and sustainable development. Gandhi promoted nonviolence not just as a philosophy and a political strategy, but as a means to achieve justice and change. Indeed, many of his ideas foreshadow the holistic thinking behind the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. To take just one example, Gandhi understood the importance of advocacy and action around the issue of sanitation and led campaigns for clean drinking water and hygienic facilities when this issue was still deeply taboo. Gandhi's efforts on behalf of the people of lower caste and those considered untouchables, whom he renamed Arijan, or Children of God, should inspire us in our efforts to leave no one behind and to help those farthest behind first. Gandhi looked at the world from the point of view of the lowliest and the most humble, but is acknowledged as one of the greatest leaders of all time. His values truly transcend borders. We have issued our own United Nations stamp to commemorate this occasion, but we are in the company of more than 100 countries that have issued or are planning to issue stamps to honor this global leader. Gandhi's enduring legacy is his continued relevance to our thinking and action on a broad sweep of issues, from protecting the environment to promoting justice, from education to inequality. His teaching remains fresh and thought-provoking, including his emphasis on the importance of facing up to the truth with courage. Perhaps Gandhi's most important legacy was in creating a culture of peace, improving the effectiveness of non-violent non-cooperation, and drawing the world's attention to the gap between what we do and what we are capable of doing. Gandhi's ideas drive the work of the United Nations for equality, empowerment, and global citizenship every day. I know they also drive the thinking of many global leaders. I commend those who have decided to pay tribute to Gandhi's legacy by marking this anniversary with a project connected to one of the Sustainable Development Goals, a fitting way to honor this most action-oriented leader. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Government of India for supporting the elimination of single-use plastic at the United Nations and the installation of solar panels and a green roof on top of the conference building. I wish you all a successful and inspiring meeting and the capacity to fully understand and make living in our hearts the thinking and teaching of Gandhi.
Thank you very much, Secretary Guterres. Thank you very much, Secretary General Guterres, for underlining the synergy between Gandhian values and the objectives of the United Nations. We'd like to inform our audience that Secretary General Guterres has to leave for another meeting. So huge round of applause for Secretary General Antonio Gutteres. It is now my privilege to invite His Excellency Mr. Moon Jae-in, President of the Republic of Korea, to address this August gathering.
귀한 자리에 초대해 주신 나렌드라 모디
Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who invited me to this precious event, and other distinguished heads of state and government, pleased to meet you all. The UN was born out of the ravages of World War II for the sake of the independence of repressed nations and world peace. It is truly meaningful that an event to honor Mahatma Gandhi, the symbol of nonviolent resistance for freedom and peace, is being held at the UN. One of Gandhi's teachings embodies the UN's spirit. There is no path to peace. Peace is the path. At the same time, it has become a compass for navigating toward peace on the Korean peninsula. For Koreans who are ushering in an era of permanent peace, Gandhi is a great teacher who inspires us with wisdom and courage. This year marks the 105th anniversary of the birth of Gandhi, and also the centennial of Korea's March 1st independence movement. Korea's pro-independence Manse demonstrations that started on March 1st, 1919, or a massive struggle joined by some 2 million people, approximately 10% of the entire population back then. Ordinary, nameless people stood up to Japanese imperialists through the strength of nonviolence, and their spirit of the March 1st independence movement served as the foundation for a democratic republic. A century ago, Koreans shared camaraderie-like bonds and hopes with Gandhi and other contemporary Indians. They blessed and respected the man who was leading his country through satyagraha, nonviolent resistance. They also had extraordinary trust in and expectations for the Indian people who were marching step by step toward independence. In February 1923, the Korean people came to know about Gandhi's boycott of British goods through the press. And in the summer that year, Korea's campaign to promote the use of domestic products reached its peak. Gandhi criticized Japanese imperialists for imprisoning uncooperative Korean students, and also sent a message to encourage the Korean people on January 5, 1927, expressing his hope that Joseon would come to wholly belong to Joseon through absolutely truthful and nonviolent means. Newspapers in Korea published articles about Gandhi's Salt March for 23 consecutive days in the spring of 1930. The Korean people deeply empathized with India's nonviolence movement led by Gandhi, and they loved the poems of Rabindranath Tagore about how Korea's March 1st independence movement had touched him, and those of Sarojini Naidu, which spoke of her sympathy. Prime Minister Modi and distinguished heads of state and government, India and Korea, both having suffered from colonial rule, were partners who gave inspiration to and courage for each other's liberation. Now, India and Korea are advancing our special strategic partnership further based on the shared values of democracy and common prosperity. The world is becoming a better place with the spirit of Gandhi. Nelson Mandela overcame apartheid with the strength of inclusiveness and truth. Rosa Parks started the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955. Martin Luther King Jr. led the civil rights movement. Women in the Himalayan region started the Chipko movement against logging companies in 1974 by hugging trees and singing. All of these who fought against violence with the power of nonviolence to protect themselves and their communities, as well as nature and the dignity of life, are the descendants of the great soul Gandhi. Guaranteeing the ordinary people's right to determine their own destinies and that of their communities constitutes the very starting point of democracy. Gandhi said that we have nothing without hope. We can be happy only when we cherish and nurture hope in our daily lives. I hope that today's event to celebrate the 105th anniversary of Gandhi's birth will greatly inspire us to ponder his spirit and move toward a world where everyone embraces each other. I express my gratitude to Prime Minister Modi for his special consideration in inviting me. Given the respect and love that Koreans have for Gandhi, I'm confident that India-Korea relations will deepen further. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, for your valuable perspective on the relevance of Mahatma Gandhi's leadership. Thank you. And now I have the pleasure of inviting His Excellency, Mr. Lee Hsien Loong, Prime Minister of the Republic of Singapore, for his remarks.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very honored to be invited by Prime Minister Modi to attend this commemoration of the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi's ideas had influence far beyond India's shores. His philosophy of non-violent resistance distinguished India from other independence movements of that era. He championed non-violence to the core of his being. Even more remarkably, he could persuade his countrymen to desist from violence, even when they had been persecuted and severely provoked. As he said, an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. This was sage advice then, and remains so now. We live in a world that's not only more diverse, but also more interconnected. Differences are more easily amplified, and people more readily take offense. Tensions and conflicts are prevalent, not just between countries, races, and religions, but also within them. But if we take Gandhi's message to heart, then we must try our best to resolve differences calmly and peacefully, appreciating the views of the other side, and without inflaming passions or hardening attitudes. In so doing, we will build mutual understanding, tolerance, and respect for one another. Gandhi also firmly believed in the intrinsic equality of every person, and this value resonates with Singapore because our nation was founded on this same principle. We became independent in 1965 because we wanted to be a country where everyone was treated equally, regardless of their race, language, or religion. And we continue to uphold that fundamental ideal. We work very hard to strengthen our social cohesion and expand the common space shared by the different races and religious groups in Singapore. We also strive to make a modest contribution to global efforts to promote mutual understanding and respect. For example, this year Singapore hosted an international conference on cohesive societies. And there we had good exchanges with scholars and practitioners from other countries, learned from their experiences, and we hope they also took away something useful. After Gandhi died and was cremated, Singapore had the honor of receiving part of his ashes. The ashes were immersed at sea in accordance with Hindu custom 2 miles from the southern tip of Singapore. Last year, Prime Minister Modi visited Singapore and unveiled a plaque to mark this spot. There are other places in Singapore which honor Gandhi's legacy, such as the memorial, which is home to our Hindi society, and also a Mahatma Gandhi Center for Universal Values that is in one of our schools. But beyond these physical traces, Gandhi's ideas and ideals have resonated and endured. Gandhi's birthday, the 2nd of October, falls next week. The UN General Assembly has declared it the International Day of Non-Violence. So it is therefore, it's fitting that we gather today to celebrate the legacy of a remarkable man. And may Gandhi's memory continue to inspire and to bring out the best in all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for your enlightening views. And now it's my privilege to invite Her Excellency Ms. Sheikh Hasina, Prime Minister of the People's Republic of Bangladesh, to address this august gathering.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Honorable Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi, distinguished friends and leaders from different countries, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, Assalamu alaikum, and a very good evening to you all. I feel honored to join you today as we celebrate the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi in this commemorative event, Leadership Matters, Relevance of Mahatma Gandhi in the Contemporary World. Gandhiji, a true patriot, a statesman, and a saint. dedicated his life for humankind. He was a beacon of hope, a light in darkness, and a savior in despair. His brilliant and mesmerizing leadership showed the world that an individual could bring earth-shaking social and political change in a non-violent way. Let me cite a famous quote of Mahatma Gandhi. I quote, "You must be the change you wish to see in the world," unquote. Gandhiji believed in people's power, which rests in individuals who are their own masters. His selfless love and affection for people, regardless of social standing, caste, color, creed, or religion, earned him the title Mahatma. His principles of tolerance, nonviolence, and harmonious coexistence would continue to guide us as we seek to build nations. In fact, his ideals of diversity are cherished and celebrated all over the globe wherever democracy is practiced. We are proud to have Gandhi Ashram Trust in Bangladesh since 1946. It follows the Gandhian philosophy and rural development, peace, and social harmony, and works for the rural poor with particular focus on women. Dear friends, as I pay my tribute to Gandhiji, I fondly recall my father and father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, who took inspiration from him during his formative stage of leadership. We are now preparing to celebrate the birth centenary of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujib beginning in March 2020. Gandhiji's love for common people and ideals of non-violence contributed to shaping Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujib's vision of struggle, non-cooperation, peaceful movement against oppression and tyranny by the then Pakistani rulers against the peace-loving Bengalis. In the face of provocations, he remained unmoved and committed to the principles of nonviolence. He, however, declared the independence of Bangladesh in the early hours of 26 March 1971 and called for armed struggle against the Pakistani military dictator, the Pakistan occupation military dictators, when they unleashed an unprecedented genocide against the unarmed civilians in Bangladesh. Whenever I look at Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujib's charismatic leadership, his sacrifice and struggle for people, I find a great degree of similarity with Mahatma Gandhi. And both of them were assassinated. Excellencies, you are well aware that we are currently hosting almost 1.1 million Rohingyas who fled violence and atrocities in Myanmar. Despite resource constraint and other serious challenges, our decision to shelter such a huge number of Rohingyas emanated from our conscience, driven by love for humanity, a virtue we see in Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujib and Mahatma Gandhi. We are living in a world where hatred and bigotry leading to terrorism and violent extremism are dividing the humankind more than ever before. Gandhiji's philosophy of life and his unwavering support for all peoples can unite us today to meaningfully and effectively address formidable challenges of global concerns like hunger, poverty, and impacts of climate change. On this special day, may I wish that Gandhiji's humanitarian ideals and principles would trump over all divisiveness and establish an equitable world for us and our coming generations. I thank you all.
Thank you, Prime Minister Hasina, for your valuable insights. I would like to now invite His Excellency, Mr. Andrew Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica, for his remarks.
Prime Minister Modi, distinguished leaders, excellencies, I am honored to offer personal reflections on the 150th anniversary of the birth of Mahatma Gandhi. It is fitting that we should be doing so at the headquarters of the United Nations, the epicenter of collective efforts to create a world in which all peoples can enjoy peace, safety, prosperity, regardless of race, gender, religion, or creed. As a consummate leader, devoted to the welfare of others and to sacrifice in pursuit of the greater good, Mahatma Gandhi, the great soul, remains an inspiration and constant source of motivation. His astute leadership and unflinching determination bear testimony to his vision of a kinder and loving world, and to his singular focus on righting wrongs and addressing injustices. Our mission should be clear. We must build on Gandhi's legacy. We must be advocates for the poor and the weak. We must be catalysts for positive change. This is best achieved through greater common understanding, tolerance, and mutual respect. It is not beyond our reach. Gandhi's doctrine of nonviolence and sacrifice, together with his vision for a more equitable world, is a source of personal inspiration to my own leadership, and I know that his life's work will continue to inspire new generations to come. Leaders who are committed to the well-being and advancement of all our peoples. For Gandhi, democracy was the vehicle through which the vision of a more equitable, inclusive, and peaceful world could be achieved. Democratic governance represented an age of awakening for the poorest of the poor, which he said gives the weak the same chance as the strong. Gandhi understood and personified that we can struggle against injustice without violence, and that we can achieve revolutionary change without bloodshed. As members of this most important global body, we must continue to hold fast to Gandhi's principle of peace and the rejection of violence as a means of settling our differences. The UN Charter is aligned with the principles and philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi. It states, the only true basis of enduring peace is the willing cooperation of free peoples in a world in which, relieved of the menace of aggression, all may enjoy economic and social security. Confronted as we are by violence, terrorism, and extremist ideology, We must ensure that Gandhi's legacy is remembered and celebrated as a beacon of hope for us to pursue. As Gandhi powerfully demonstrated, nonviolence is a weapon of the strong. Mahatma Gandhi, the epitome of selfless and dedicated commitment to protecting the downtrodden and the outcast, continues to resonate with all of us. He remains as relevant today as he did over a century ago. He has left us a profound legacy and an example for this and succeeding generations to follow as we strive for peace, social justice, inclusive and sustainable economic development. I thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for your words of wisdom. It is now my honor to invite Her Excellency, Ms. Jacinda Ardern, Prime Minister of New Zealand, to address this distinguished gathering.
Ina mana, ina reo, ina rangatira mā, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora and namaste. I would like to begin by acknowledging the host of this event, Prime Minister Modi, and I want to thank you for the invitation to speak here today. Our presence here, I hope, is a reflection of the close ties between New Zealand and India, but also the legacy of Mahatma Gandhi, which was felt in the furthest corners of the globe, including New Zealand, where I learnt of Mahatma Gandhi as a schoolgirl. I would also like to acknowledge my fellow speakers. As political leaders, there is much that we can learn from Gandhi as we search for common ground to address the world's pressing problems. For me, there are three aspects of Gandhi's message that carry particular weight: tolerance, equality, and the sanctity of non-violence and peace. These are values that we should always keep in the forefront of our minds, but not just in good times, but especially when faced with difficult choices. In New Zealand, we have recently witnessed the tragic consequences of intolerance and violence. An act of terrorism that sought to divide us, that took the lives of 51 innocent worshippers. Yet in the face of this act of hatred and violence, the New Zealand Muslim community opened their doors for all New Zealanders and the world to grieve with them. Their act of peace was a powerful and empowering message. In opening their doors, they sowed the seeds of diversity, humanity, forgiveness, and what we call in New Zealand, aroha, or love. They broke a potential cycle of violence. At a time when religion could have been used to divide us, we saw the unifying power of interfaith and intercultural understanding. We witnessed, as Gandhi himself understood, the inner truth of all faiths, the commonalities of dignity, of humanity and compassion that bind all people and indeed all religions. The 15 March attacks are a tragedy that we will not forget and that require us to reflect on what we need to do and be if we're to create the society that we desire. But we also have to be reminded of the power of holding true to the values that should be universal. As Gandhi himself said, the very first step in nonviolence is that we cultivate in our daily life, as between ourselves, truthfulness, humility, tolerance, and loving kindness. We must build societies that are inclusive of all religions, races, genders, and that solve disputes without recourse to violence. New thinking is also required to address the inequality that continues to blight the existence of many. These are challenges for my country, New Zealand, just as they are for many others. But like Gandhi, we should not be afraid to stand up and transform our societies for the better. Gandhi also modeled the expression of political dissent through non-violent opposition. Gandhi's peaceful march across Western India to protest against attacks on salt created a path for countless other non-violent political movements throughout the 20th and 21st centuries. We continue to see this power today as our young people march to effect change across the globe, creating a safe space for the expression of different ideas, for political debate and dialogue, whether it be on the streets or online, remains an essential part of our democratic and pluralistic societies. It is critical in resolving tensions in a peaceful manner. I believe that Gandhi's legacy is as relevant today as it ever was. It calls on us to reject bigotry and embrace kindness and truth. It calls on us to strive for equality no matter how difficult and entrenched systems are, and it demands that we recognise the lasting value of peace. Let us all recommit to those principles as we acknowledge 150 years of an enormous legacy. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for your insightful remarks. This brings us to the close of this event. On behalf of the delegation of India, I take this opportunity to thank the world leaders, dignitaries, and distinguished guests present this afternoon. I would like to request the audience to kindly remain seated as we wait for our leaders to leave.
Sit.